Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 20 of the Millennials in Print podcast. I am Alex Krupski, joined once again by my co host, Jake Hoffman. We have a very special guest today. As always, on the show, we have Brent Niemuth, who is the president and chief creative officer over at Schmid. So, Brent, thanks for joining the show.
Thanks so much for having me. This is great.
Yeah, we're looking forward to the conversation. And so, kind of how we always start usually every conversation is I think people are probably familiar with Schmid, probably familiar with you as well in our space. But for people that aren't, could you kind of dive into your background a little bit and how you got into Schmid and kind of the creative and branding part of your work?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll start with myself specifically, and then explain a little bit about
Perfect.
Schmid. Um, my degree is in graphic design, visual communication. So I'm a designer by trade. Got into the business that route. Um, Worked my way up through advertising agencies. Became a creative director. Eventually headed up one of the largest creative teams here in Kansas City at one of the big agencies. So it was along that path that led me to branding beyond just design, but branding. How do you build a brand? And fortunately, at that big agency, was able to sort of peek behind the curtain of a lot of major brands and saw how they did it. Saw the decisions they made, was part of helping create their brand story. So just fell in love with the idea of helping define what brands stand for, what their story is, how to communicate it. And then went on my own for a few years. Had the Niemuth Design Group for a few years, and was loving it when Schmid came knocking on the door. This was 17 years ago. I had never heard of Schmid. Local direct marketing agency here in Kansas City, and they were interested in forming a partnership, bringing me on. But I was happy doing what I was doing. But the more I spoke to the folks at Schmid, got to know them, I met Jack Schmid, the founder, and fell in love with the guy. He was retiring at that point. Sold the company to Lois Brayfield, our current CEO, and Lois and I together saw an opportunity to take the direct marketing expertise of Schmid. Schmid's a direct marketing specialist from day one, been in business for about 40 years. Over the years that have evolved from data and analytics to our specialty today is creative. But added to that is branding, and that's the opportunity that Lois and I saw 17 years ago. Hey, what if we took the science and the proven techniques of direct marketing specific to catalogs, that's still our bread and butter, took that and combined it with sort of this sexy, seductive storytelling of advertising and branding, and you mash that up, what would that look like? And that's who we are today, Schmid, sort of a hybrid agency, direct marketers for sure. We follow the rules that we know work, but we're also storytellers at our core.
Little left brain, right brain coming together there nicely.
I guess you could describe it that way. Yeah,
that's awesome. So one of the things too that becomes kind of apparent when you poke around on the site a little bit, you yourself are kind of your own brand a little bit, right? Because you have kind of a dynamic viewpoint that maybe the industry isn't always the most used to hearing, right?
Yeah.
So can you just kind of talk about like where did that kind of branch off from? Were you just so sick of like, hey, all right, people got to hear this, or where did that kind of come from?
That's exactly where it came from. Yeah.
And I hear you.
Specifically, it's this belief that brands need to be more human, need to act more human. And I coined a title, a phrase, humanity marketing, hoping to convince people in the direct marketing industry to look at their brands differently. And that came from my advertising background. It was mostly driven by gut instinct back in the day. A lot of how creatives operated agencies, we know in our gut that the best way to talk to people is on a human level, an emotional level. We knew intuitively for decades, back to the Mad Men days in the 40s and 50s, right? That if you want to sell something to somebody, you got to connect with them emotionally. They're not just making a purchase based on logic. So I arrived at J. Schmid 17 years ago. The first time in the direct marketing industry, I was not a direct marketer. I was a brand guy. But lo and behold, what I saw across the industry was catalogs, specifically websites for sure, just selling products and not telling their story, not trying to convince people emotionally why they should buy. It's just, here's what we have to sell. Here's what it does. Here's what it costs. Please buy it. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, man, there's such a huge opportunity here. If we all just better understood that we're people selling to people. And if you talk to them person to person and you're open and honest and you convey your personality of that brand in a real and authentic way, they will be more attracted to you. They will like you. Therefore, they will probably be more likely to buy from you. And it's just, maybe ironic, but it's not just theory. This stuff works. It's proven through neuroscience. So yeah, a lot of this was born out of frustration of, guys, we can all do better. We can do better.
Well, it's interesting. I feel like as far as the creative space and the agency space, at the point of the downturn, maybe of direct mail and shortly after the recession, I feel like maybe a lot of agencies decided to offload that part of their business, where I'll say J. Schmid held the line a little bit. So what was it about that that you guys were like, well, we still see potential growth there for years to come, and now that you see that paying off years later, right?
Through our focus in catalog and print.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. There was a moment in time. Great question, by the way. There was a moment in time where we had to decide, do we stay true to our path? When we saw a lot of other agencies, folks who we have crossed paths with over the years, friends of ours, frankly, in the industry, who did what we did, either close their doors or pretty dramatically change who they are. They went strictly digital, or just changed the makeup of the agency. And we decided, you know what, we still believe in the power of print for sure. It's not just a fad or something that's fading away. In fact, we were looking down the road years ahead, anticipating that there might be a day when print has a resurgence, and we want to be around for that. In fact, we want to help lead the way. And lo and behold, that happened. Digitally native brands today are knocking on our door, trying to figure out, how do I get into this print world? I started my business online. Back in the day, that was the cool thing to do. However, we realized that print actually works. We just don't know how to do it. Can you help us? And so fortunately for us at J. Schmid, what we hoped would come true did. And so we're glad that we stuck to our guns, stayed true to our direct marketing DNA, and specifically print. It's paid off.
Yeah. So one of the questions that I have for sure is, so it seems to me too, part of it is an alignment too with a new business model, right? This whole like direct to consumer concept, right? Like we want to own our customers, and that kind of ties into the storytelling element, obviously, right? So one of the questions that immediately comes to mind is, what you seem to kind of happen, right, is kind of brands they ramp like crazy, right? And then they have these lofty growth targets, right? And in order for them to kind of keep scaling and keep growing, they tend to kind of keep giving up ownership stake, right? So PE gets involved, VC gets involved, things like that. Do you then have a challenge trying to keep them in the storytelling and in this creative mentality when it starts to become more about like, okay, here's ROI data analytics? Or how are you kind of managing those types of conversations, interactions?
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. And yes, that's exactly what we see and try to help brands navigate is sort of the lifespan of a typical, say a digitally native brand
Yeah.
who might launch online and come out of the gate strong.
Yeah.
Um, and then they have to figure out how to grow and maintain
Yeah.
that growth. Um, they might get acquired. Um, and so now they have to figure out uh, either a new path or a broader path
Sure.
to that growth. And print and the direct to consumer model in general looks very attractive. And it's funny, we laugh a lot internally at J. Schmid that back in the day, direct to consumer and direct marketers in general were sort of the uncool kids.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted to sit at our table. And then suddenly today it's the cool thing.
Yeah.
Hey, we're trying to figure out the direct to consumer model. We're a direct to consumer brand, as they say proudly.
Yeah.
And we mail catalogs. Isn't that cool? But they do it because it works and they can measure it, right? And it's still one of the most effective channels to drive engagement. Some of that means driving sales directly, or just driving traffic to the website, which is what they need, or driving traffic to a retail store. So brands like Warby Parker and Bombas and all these guys that started online, now they open up retail stores. Hey, we can actually sell this stuff in a brick and mortar store. Who thought that might work? And then we got to drive people to the store and online. So let's start talking to our customers directly, direct to consumer. And what if we dropped a catalog in their mailbox? Would that drive engagement? Oh my gosh, it does. And but along that path, to your point, at some point, often it starts to become about just the numbers. And we're looking at data every day, and we start making decisions driven by that data only. And they lose sight of the fact that, guys, you built that brand on a relationship with the people, and you're forgetting about that relationship. And so it's often our job to keep reminding them, trying to bring them back to the story. That should never go away. Everything else is just a channel, just a way to communicate the story. It doesn't matter to the consumer if they're connecting with your brand online, through an email, on social media, with a postcard that they get in the mailbox, or the fact that they walk into a store and talk to somebody behind the counter. It's all the same brand to them. They like interacting with the brand in multiple ways. But what they're there for is the relationship. And so it's just a constant reminder of let's not forget about that.
Yeah.
I'm just because we're on the topic of digitally native brands and direct to consumer, and I think Jake could speak very well to this point too. What I'm curious about is what pain points you see when onboarding these clients and customers that have never done print before, because you can get as granular as RGB versus CMYK. You can go as far as postage, paper, and educating them on the logistics of the industry. I'm curious from yours and Jay Schmid's perspective, what are some kind of pain points?
All of the above and then some.
Yes.
Who knew that print was complicated and hard? Oh my gosh. That I grew up through print, right? When I started back in the day, that's all there was. There wasn't digital marketing necessarily. It was just, that was right at the forefront.
Right.
So that's all I knew, and I had to learn digital. And to me, digital was hard. But now it's flipped, and most folks, marketers, are digital first, and especially the folks who are embracing print for the first time. There's a lot to learn, and it's not easy to explain. There's a lot of hurdles to overcome. It's not necessarily apples to apples. Print is very similar to digital, and it's not that different. That's not true. And Alex, you make a good point on some of the basic things like RGB to CMYK, things like that. What does different types of paper on press,
substrate,
what impact does that have? different considerations should you make? How far in advance do you need to buy your paper? What are the limitations? There's just a whole list of things that it's complicated, and fortunately, there are folks like Jay Schmid and others out there who do this for a living, where brands can just rely on folks. Just ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Don't assume just keep asking and ask the paper supplier and your printer, etc. Because these folks do this for a living. So rely on them. There's a lot of unknowns for folks who get into it for the first time. So yeah, it's the list is way too long.
Yeah.
We could spend a whole topic doing that, right? A whole 35
we gotta cut off at 11. Remember?
Yeah,
so.
that'll be episode 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Pain points.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I definitely agree. I for me, part of it too, right, is there's not many people that in today's world grow up like using printers, right? Like it's all like with eDocs and all that kind of stuff. So there's just an inherently like a native in a skill set. Like a lot of brands that I see aren't going out and hiring like, hey, we want a direct mail marketing manager, right? It's an e-commerce person that's suddenly like, hey, go do print. And it's not as simple as that. So I think that there is a major reliance on providers and the service providers to be experts in their craft and kind of walk them through, okay, here's what's going to happen if you go on this path, or here's maybe something to consider, things like that, for sure.
100%. You can't assume people know today. I mean, you gotta cover all the basics, and look out for the landmines along the way.
Yeah, which there are always a couple.
There's always some.
One question I did have too is when you kind of made this point earlier, and I think it's a good one. I just want to make sure that we're giving it kind of the full scope of the conversation. So when you talked about like it's one brand, right? Is that how you guys are approaching creative? Agnostic to channel, meaning, hey, we've got this brand, we're going to define this brand at its core, and then we're going to let the design flow into whether it's print or social or all those different things. Is that kind of what your strategy is at Jay Schmid?
Spot on, 100%. Yeah, and here's the best way I can explain the point of view. We look at brands as if they were actually people,
Okay.
because consumers, people, look at brands and think of them in that way. We associate with brands based on human characteristics that we apply to them. If I threw out a list of brand names, you would immediately have an impression in your head of who that brand is, how they behave, how they act, how they talk, why you like them. Southwest Airlines, what comes to mind? Target, what comes to mind? Rolex watches, what comes to mind? Something immediately comes to mind, and it's probably based on human characteristics. It's a funny brand, or a smart and knowledgeable brand, or it's a warm and inviting brand. And that's what we expect every time we talk to them. Is it the same person or brand that I've always known? So as a person myself, I am who I am. I act the way I do. I use a certain tone and language when I talk. I dress a certain way. So there's an expectation when I encounter family members or friends, right? It's me. It's the same person they've always known. Yet, depending on who I'm talking to and where I'm talking to them and when I'm talking to them, the way I talk and the topic in which I talk might change. I talk to my wife differently than I talk to coworkers, and I talk to them differently than I talk to my friends. It's still me. I've not changed, but the message might change. My tone might change slightly. So the channel in which I choose to talk to people in the audience might differ a little bit, but I don't change who I am based on who I'm talking to. Same goes for brands. It's one brand, same personality, same traits, same characteristics. the brand is who it is, and people expect it to stay pretty much the same. Yet the message might be tweaked depending on the channel. Brands talk to their consumers differently on social media than they do, in a video or online or in a catalog. So yes, brand first, understand it, then figure out, what do I want to say? Where do I want to say it? Those things can differ.
I have to think too, kind of just running with that analogy a little bit as like a brand, as a person, if all of a sudden that person, like if I'm expecting to have a conversation with Brent and all of a sudden I'm like, who is this? Like, this is not the Brent that I know or something, that would cause sort of a discourse, right?
Yes.
So do you see that a lot of times? Because like one of the things that we see a lot in just from a print standpoint is like you have a brand, right? And a CMO will come in, right? They'll be there 3 years, and then the next CMO will come in, and there isn't sort of a consistent branding transition. Like each one is kind of trying to take it in its own direction. I have to think that would cause some type of conflict, right, with their customers. They're like, well, wait a second, like we're changing again, or we're pivoting again, or do you see that
happens all the time? Happens all the time. And here's the fine line that we have to walk, and it's super fine, man. It's a balance. Do not try this at home, because it's hard, man. It's trying to figure out, how do we stay true to the DNA of the brand, who we are. Let's not try to be somebody we're not. Let's not change for the sake of changing. Just because we have a new CMO in here and they want to make their mark doesn't mean that the entire brand has to change. Although brands who are stagnant and never evolve, that's dangerous too. So you got to figure out a way to constantly move ahead, evolve, change. Again, back to the example of, me as a person. I'm not the same guy today as I was when I was 18 years old, or 25 or 35. I've grown and evolved, hopefully.
Let's hope.
Let's hope, right? Let's hope that brands grow and evolve and change and morph and learn. So I'm not talking about being the same forever.
Sure.
But just staying true to who you are is important, at the same time that you're trying to figure out how to evolve and change over time.
The branding part of everything is just such an interesting conversation to me. And one question that I have is, do you feel like brands need to be a little bit more fluid today with the way things are moving? Meaning, I think there's so many brands that are aligning with things that are going on in the real world now than ever before, right? Social justice stuff, the environment, just anything like that. So do you feel like that part of the conversation is more fluid?
Yes. Yeah. And that's something that those of us in branding are trying to figure out in real time. Because, back in the day, you could sort of define a brand. Here's who we are. Here's what we stand for. Here's what makes us different. Set it and forget it. It's just, we don't have to try to figure out on a daily basis how we're going to react to something. Man, has that changed dramatically in the last 10 years, 5 years, 3 years. Now our brand is not defined by us. Our brand is defined by the consumer. They will let us know what our brand is and should be. We got to follow their lead now. And so we have to understand what's important to them, what matters to them. And this is what's often very difficult for brands today, is consumers, and especially younger consumers, millennials, talking to you guys.
Damn millennials.
Dang it. It's things that people wouldn't necessarily voice out loud before, personal feelings and opinions. That's commonplace now, thanks to you guys. You are forcing brands to be transparent and authentic. Brands can't hide behind anything anymore, and that's a good thing. But it just makes it harder for brands to try to figure out how to pivot sometimes on a daily basis. And they have to decide, make hard decisions. Do we react to this civil unrest that's happening, to whatever that topic is? Do we voice our opinion? Do we make a stand or not? And that's up to the individual brand, right? But yeah, way harder today than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah. So I was looking at just kind of your profile online, and some of the brands that I saw that you worked for or worked with: Jockey, Reebok, Audi, Microsoft, Disney. But I think the biggest name of all that you've worked with that that I saw was a Randall Corporation, right?
Yes, at the top of the pyramid, at the top of the mountain.
So, better believe it.
We were talking about it right before the show, but I think that's such a cool thing. So you were part of our rebranding efforts a while back, right? 10 years ago, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay.
My friends at a Randall years ago, I don't even remember how many years ago it was. You guys might know, but a Randall asked me to come in and help rebrand them. And it was not an exercise so much in a design makeover, but more so in a positioning. They were in a growth mode and a pretty critical time in the life of the brand, and they trying to figure out, where do we go in the future and how do we get there? And again, looking for ways to evolve yet stay true to their core roots. So I was fortunate enough to come in and meet with the leadership team and help figure out a path forward. So out of that came a new brand positioning, new story, new messaging, new tagline, etc. So it was mostly an exercise in brand clarity. The brand had probably gotten a little muddied over the years, and so it was just kind of pushing away all the stuff that was getting in the way of the new core belief.
Awesome. One question that kind of puts me down a little bit of a path to is, because we're, that's like a B2B, right? So I think B2C, it seems to me that there's a more clear understanding of the need to express value. Where do we stand on kind of social issues and things like that. Although I do start to see B2B going that way, right? But what I would say, and this is maybe more of a question or kind of a thought experiment, is I see B2B brands struggle mightily when it comes to catalog creative to tell a story, because I still think that they're just like, here's all the products that we can sell. Square inch analysis, we're going to put 97 on a page and we're going to have a 136 page book. Do you think that even in those types of business units, right, like B2B, if you're selling like supplies or things like that, that it's still, they would generate more long term if they were to go more of like the human brand route, where you're saying, let's do storytelling, let's cut product, let's do all that?
I guarantee you they would see success. We've seen it over and over again with our own clients, our own B2B clients.
Cool.
Yet, to your point, that path for B2B brands for some reason seems so much harder, because they for some reason, and I've never understood this forever, as long as I've been in the business, B2B brands view themselves differently. Hey, we're not a consumer brand. We don't have a cool story to tell. We're just here to sell stuff. People don't look to us anyway in the same way that they look to B2C, and they sell themselves short. And, my message to them over and over again is, guys, at the end of the day, it's people selling to people and people buying from other people.
Yep.
And there's this thing in the way called business to business brand. Well, businesses are made up of people, and the folks who are buying from you have real concerns. They like you or they don't like you for real reasons. So none of that changes. Now, the logistics might change. The fact that it's not maybe their dollars that they're making that purchase with, it's money from the company. So things like that differ. So you have to keep those differences in mind. But at the very foundation, it's still about people. It's buying or selling to other people. So, but that's a harder sell to make still to most B2B brands.
I've always thought that too, because I think if you did, I think you could absolutely start an agency just redoing print brands, like print companies' websites and brands. You could do an entire agency just built
Good.
on that.
You'd stay pretty busy.
That might be my retirement plan. I
There
don't know.
you go.
Still
I think you're onto
spitballing.
something.
Yeah, I'm gonna cut that out of the final edit because that's our retirement idea, and we don't want anybody else to steal that. So
Love it.
Yeah, I always just, it's just one of those things that, like, you said it much more eloquently, but I think the reality is whether you're B2B, B2C, it's still people at the end of the day trying to make purchasing decisions. So yeah, I couldn't agree more with that.
Yeah. Here's a quick example
Sure,
of an entire industry. Insurance industry. Back in the day, insurance companies were boring. They sold the same thing. It was a commodity item. Today, some of the best advertising is coming from insurance companies.
Great point.
Geico and Progressive, etc. They're filled with personality. They're funny. They're relatable. People like them. People look forward to messages from insurance companies. Oh my gosh. So, man, if they can figure out how to do it, the rest of us can figure.
Should be.
Oh yeah.
It's hilarious you say that because I've been a Progressive guy for maybe like 8 years now, something like that, and it was all because of their advertising and commercials. I was like, they seem awesome. I get their value prop right away. And now my favorite commercials today, they weren't running when I first started, but it's the turning into your parents commercials. Those
so
are
relatable.
The best ones that
we all see
right now.
We all see it.
and why is that? Because the message and the delivery, everything is so human. It's about people. I can relate to my parents, and my kids see me in those commercials, and it's suddenly on a human level. It's genius. Good for them.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. Well, honestly, so I think we still have plenty of time. But as far as our question list, we want to kind of kick it over to you, Brent. Is there anything in particular we haven't covered so far that you'd like to cover? It's kind of how we start to wrap up the show a little bit and just being conscious of everybody's time. But is there anything we haven't touched yet that you wanted to discuss?
Oh gosh, let's see. Maybe one topic, as long as we're talking about print and catalog specifically, and let's keep talking about print, shall we? I think it's important to chat a little bit about the necessity, really, not just the luxury, but the necessity of print, catalog specifically, but print in general. Being a part of the overall marketing mix and not this separate thing that's set aside and treated differently, which I think people used to do, some still do. There's a separate budget for print or catalog marketing, and that budget continues to shrink because folks are taking dollars away and putting it over into digital, or they're walking away from print because they can't afford it in their minds. And when they do create print marketing, catalogs specifically, maybe there's a separate team internally that creates those materials, and creatively it's not tied into anything. It's a standalone piece. And I think that's a huge mistake. I think the brands today who are successful have figured out a way to take their print marketing efforts, their catalog creative, and make it feel seamless somehow with everything else that they're doing. Maybe they're running a campaign, which we try to promote big time at Schmid. Hey guys, rather than all of your marketing efforts being unlinked and sort of standalone efforts, you've got this email campaign, you're doing something totally different on social media, then a catalog shows up in the mail and it has nothing to do with anything else you're saying. Then I stumble upon a brand who's got a campaign that ties all of that together, and it's just so significantly better and more memorable. To me, that's a huge missed opportunity today. Even though people might still be printing catalogs and they might have embraced print, they haven't taken that next step and said, all right, how do I make it feel like a part of everything else that I'm doing?
Yeah, I think in at least at Aranda, one industry that we see that looks that does that part of it really well, I feel like, is the outdoor retail space. We work with a lot of outdoor retail clients, and they all seem to just have that model kind of down. And we talked about this earlier too, where a mistake that some brands make is throwing all the product that they possibly can into a catalog, where really all the outdoor retail clients, at least that we work with, they really embrace that megalog or that lifestyle catalog, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's impressive, and it gets me excited about their products.
Yes.
Yeah.
We work with a lot of similar brands. A lot of outdoor retailers, apparel brands, and they do such a good job, better than any other industry that I can think of tying print into everything else that they're doing, wrapping it in a campaign or a story that's consistent across the board, taking the time and effort and the real estate in a catalog to tell the story. And the feedback we get from other brands often is, yeah, but they can get away with it because they're Patagonia or whatever. they're REI, so they can do that. Well, that's no excuse. You can do it too.
Yeah.
There's
Right?
no written rule anywhere that only outdoor retail brands can do these things. Anybody can do those things. In fact, everybody should be doing those things.
Yeah.
It's just they've figured it out, and they've got the secret sauce, and they're blowing everybody else away. If I was a different brand in a different industry, I'd be mimicking everything that those guys are doing.
Yeah, definitely. I think the point about print being sort of a siloed entity is something that I would say the majority of clients that I work with, and I'm in kind of a unique position where a lot of the first time clients that are first time ever printing, I get involved with, just as kind of like with on the data side and the all sorts of different things like that. But it is very interesting because what we see time and time again, and the data will tell us this, right, is when you stop siloing your print as like this other entity, and it's got its own budget, and we're not really super sure what it does, and we're going to measure it based on like a match back that's going to take 70 to 90 days, and those, there's a whole rabbit hole we could go down with that. But it becomes abundantly clear when they look at it as a campaign and part of an integrated marketing strategy, the results are significantly different. We're talking percentage points different, like 2x, 3x, 4x in terms of return. So yeah, I am not super certain why that's so hard for people to wrap their head around. I don't know if it's the novelty of it, of the complexity, the price point. I'm not really sure, but every time you see someone come along and they're like, hey, this catalog campaign, you're like, okay, this is going to be a good time. So
I just saw a study done. I don't recall offhand who did the study, but I saw the results of a study not that long ago that compared marketing efforts that, Group A had no campaign that tied it together.
Sure.
It was just individual marketing efforts. Yeah. And then Bucket B, Group B, had a campaign that linked all the marketing efforts together. Group B, the one that had campaigns, twice as effective.
Yeah.
Twice. Yeah. So, hey, if I want to make twice the money, if I want to sell twice as many things, if I want to have twice the success, the writing's on the wall, man. It's super clear. There's proof out there that campaigns versus non-campaigns, it's a no-brainer, man. To your point, it's like off the chart numbers.
Yeah, it's just hilarious. Do you think part of it has to do with the planning in the initial legwork to like really put a campaign together, which is why people are like, well, I'll just do this here, and I'll just, okay, we want to send a postcard here. And they're not looking at it and saying, okay, on an annualized basis, right? So for 2023, here are the 4, 5, 6, 8, 12, whatever campaigns we want to run. And what does that look like? Do you think it's harder to do campaigns? Like it's more of an effort thing, which is why people don't do it?
I think there's a lot of reasons. That's one of them.
Sure.
One big reason is I think brands are reactive today because they have to be. It's hard to stop what you're doing and be proactive and plan out 6 months, a year in advance. Totally. We're all putting out fires every day, and a lot of brands internally are understaffed. still. And so not enough people to get stuff done. And so the easier thing to do, frankly, is just, what do we have to get done today? How many emails do we have to get out?
Postcard,
I've got
email,
a postcard that I have to get
social
done.
post.
That's it. And I check
Yeah.
the boxes, and okay, tomorrow I'll look at the list again. And we never stop and take the time to plan. And there's a lot of planning with a campaign. There really is. But the payoff is undeniable.
2x.
So, yeah. Right.
Well, and not to downplay, the end metrics of any individual channel or anything, but you pull something out like, say, the catalog, and you see a ripple effect last a lot longer than just taking out one channel for that certain amount of time. So all the metrics and sales data is obviously hugely important, but we saw clients, and I'm sure you guys did too, a few years ago. I think even before, probably right at the start of maybe Jake and I getting into the industry, but you saw some people take out the catalog, and they've turned over CMOs 3 or 4 times since then.
It's brutal.
It's an interesting conversation.
At the start of COVID, people, a lot of brands panicked. Budgets were unpredictable. And so one of the first moves was, well, let's stop mailing, and it was horrible for some brands. The results were immediate and painful. However, we also saw brands who said, hey, man, people are at home now more. We can have a direct conversation with them. Let's mail more. Let's mail more often. And it worked. So, yeah, I don't know.
I think what gets tough too is like, because if your budget is sort of unstable, right? It seems to me that when you get into like a catalog or a direct mail piece, it's a higher spend category, right? On a per piece basis and things like that. It's usually a bigger bulk of a overall marketing budget. So I think what typically happens is they start to cut circ, right? And then their sales, their top line sales start to slide. So then they just keep, you know what I'm, so it's just, you just
self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. You just slowly hemorrhage down. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, the catalog's not working. And then it's like, well, wait a second. We almost need to take a step back and say, well, what happened, right? Who are we not mailing to now? Okay, the first thing you're going to cut is prospects. Well, then there goes your growth vector. So you know what I mean? So we've seen it a lot on the print side, where it's like, you'll just get these accounts that like die a slow, painful, like it's going to be 1 million, and then it's 900,000, and then it's 750,000, and then it's 600. And you just see them, and you're just like, well, you know where this is going to end, right? And so what to me is more exciting, especially in the time that we're in now, is you have these brands that are discovering print for the first time, and their growth looks completely different, right? They'll test it at 100,000, then come back and say, we want to do 500,000 4 times a year, 5 times a year. Let's dial it up. So that's exciting from a print standpoint, that we're seeing sort of, I think the word you used earlier was like resurgence, right? Like sort of a renaissance period, right, is kind of happening right now, where people are refining it. I think the technology is getting better. Printers are getting better. It's just sort of the inputs that are getting challenging in today, right? I mean, paper is going to be a challenge. Postage is a challenge,
it is.
But
there are ways around it. A lot of the conversations we have with our clients today is, hey, I don't want to give up mailing my catalog, but I got to cut money somewhere. Is there something else I can do? So maybe it's just fewer pages. Maybe they mail a little less often. Maybe they swap out one of the books that they mail with a postcard or a direct mail piece. And that has extended the life of print marketing for a lot of our clients, and it's working for the most part. So there are other alternatives than to just stop altogether. Don't stop mailing. Don't stop printing. Just look for other ways to get around it, or to buy time until you can get back into the groove.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Brent, just because you mentioned COVID, I might as well ask about it. And just, we've asked this conversation in almost every one of our podcasts, but I'm curious what some of the things are that you guys might have taken out of it. Maybe that's a silver lining, I guess, so to speak. Maybe something got accelerated. Was it, what thoughts do you have now looking back at it, almost 2 years after the start date? Like, what takeaways do you have from the COVID pandemic?
Wow. Great question. so many potential answers, because there's a ton of a lot of lessons that we've all learned, right? But one that maybe floats to the top, just because we saw a pattern of it over the last few years, is brands stopping and maybe for the first time in a long time having the time to reassess who are we, what do we stand for. I think we've all been shaken to our core a little bit and reassessed our own personal lives, and what do we value, and where do we want to spend our time, and what's important to us, and who is important to us. And I think brands are doing the same thing, and so they're maybe for the first time again in a long time reevaluating who they are, what they stand for, the mark that they want to make on the world. And so it's forcing them to ask better questions, proven out by a lot of the phone calls that we got over the last few years since the beginning of COVID. Is, the ask is no longer, hey, I'm ready to do my next catalog, how many pages should it be? It's now, it's not channel specific. It's, here's the problem that I'm trying to solve. It's a marketing problem. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what the deliverable is. Maybe it's a catalog. Maybe it's a social media campaign. Maybe it's a video. I don't know. But I'm looking at the problem differently. Can you guys help me think through it differently? And maybe there's a better answer on the other end. So rather than go straight to the answer, brands are stopping and saying, I don't know what the answer is, but I've got a better question. So that's good in the end. I think I think all of us are a little smarter and a little more careful about how we go about things.
That's such a great point. Such a great point. Well, yeah, again, I think, and just being conscious of everybody's time. Brent, any other final thoughts that we might not have covered yet? Or Jake, did you have anything else?
No, I think that's a good place to leave off from.
Okay.
For sure.
Brent, any final words to end on?
Well, I want to thank you guys for carrying the torch forward in print. Millennials in print, who knew there was such a thing? Thank God there is a thing, that there's guys like you out there talking and preaching the gospel of print, because old guys like me who are still passionate about it, we're going to fade away and nobody's going to listen to us anymore, but they will listen to you. And so thank you for keeping this thing called print that we love so much, keeping it alive and keeping the conversation going. This has been a blast. I'm not a millennial, but I love hanging out with you guys. When we hang up, let's just keep talking for another couple hours, because this is fun.
For sure. Well, yeah. Hey, we really appreciate you coming on. Thank you for the kind words. It's been an awesome journey for sure. And there's really no end in sight, because I think the conversation will continue, and then someday I'm gonna have to turn it over to someone else to carry the torch. So no, it's good. And definitely I think we're gonna have to run this one back. So we'll have to do this one again real soon.
Right, thanks so much, Brent.
Thanks, Brent. Guys.
Thanks, guys. And we'll see you in the next episode. Appreciate it.